Hello to all you hustlers out there, welcome back to Alpha Ambition. Now, no prizes for guessing, this video is obviously about dividend ETFs, and not just that, I'm gonna share with you the list of top 4 ETFs, dividend ETFs, obviously in my opinion, that are not only great for consistent monthly income, but also are a very sensible option for a long-term wealth creation strategy with diversification at its core. So don't go anywhere, stick till the end, there's a lot action coming your way. Now, after weeks and weeks of painful drop in stocks and ETF prices around the world, the financial markets globally have started to show some really positive activity in the last week or so, with some good juicy growth coming back to some major indices. With Nasdaq, which is a tech-dominated US stock market index, bouncing back by almost 12.6% from its recent low. And S&P 500 is also back in action and is up about 8.8% from its recent low. Now, nobody knows whether this uptrend will continue and whether this is the end of the bad times for investors like you and me, but it does give investors like you and me time to reflect and also logically and sensibly think about a longer term wealth creation strategy. And when we are talking about long-term wealth creation strategy, we just cannot miss dividend-related asset classes to be added in our portfolio. While growth and crypto and all of that is necessary as well as like a risky and growth side of your portfolio, you need a little bit of strategy and a little bit of safety net of having monthly income coming in from a dividend related asset. So if you've been following my videos, chances are that you already know that we have recently analyzed list of best dividend stocks and ETFs in the Canadian market. So in case you've not seen those videos, what are you waiting for? There's a lot of value and good information covered in those 2 videos over here, and I'll also put the link in the description box so that you don't miss it. Now, coming back to today's video topic. Now, having discussed dividend stocks and ETFs, it was only the right time for us to bring best of both the worlds. So hence today's video is about best dividend ETFs, 3 of which are Canadian, and one of the options that I'm gonna share with you is the US dividend ETF. Now, if you want me to make a video on US specific ETFs or US specific dividend ETFs, please let me know in the comment section below. Now, before any further ado, let's begin with the list of top 4 dividend ETFs. Now, before that, I'm sorry, I will have to say this, that please do not forget to smash the like button and the subscribe button. Guys, this is super helpful in keeping my morale up as well. So I would really thank you for that. Let's get to the action and meat of today's video, starting with number 1 on my list, which is XDIV. It's the iShares Canadian Quality Dividend Index ETF. Okay, so let's analyze this ETF XDIV, which is an ETF by a company called iShares, which, in case if you don't know, it's managed by the company called BlackRock, which is American huge multinational investment management corporation. Now, the idea of this ETF is to provide a low-cost portfolio of Canadian stocks with above average dividend yields. And the stocks that it holds have either kept their dividends steady or only have increased the dividends. Now, let's talk some benefits. This ETF seeks to provide a long-term capital growth with exposure to 23 high-quality, large-cap diversified Canadian stocks. We'll get to this in a moment, but the focus of this ETF, and you'll see the bulk of the companies of the stocks that it holds come from financial services, utilities, and telecommunication. The fund size is also pretty decent at 732 million Canadian dollars. Now, this is very important. If you've seen my last video, the larger the size of the fund, easier it will be for you to buy and sell the ETF at any point in time, because it is directly proportional to the liquidity of the fund. Now let's talk some numbers, and I guess this is the piece that you guys are looking for. Now, the dividend yield of this ETF is a very healthy 3.94%. Now, we don't have the 5-year return for this ETF, but we do have the 3-year return, which is pretty healthy at 44%. So not only it gives a 4% dividend yield, the ETF in itself has appreciated about 44% in the last 3 years, which means that if you've invested $10,000 3 years ago, it would have become about $14,600. The risk level of this ETF is at medium, which obviously pertains to the fact it largely invests in large cap companies. Now, what I really like about this ETF is that the expense ratio is very low. It's at 0.11%, which means that if you've invested $10,000 in a year, the money that you would be paying towards managing this ETF is only $11. Now let's have a quick look at the largest holdings of this ETF. Now we can see some of the very common and well-established names like Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia, TD Bank, Manulife Financial Corporation, and some of the other healthcare companies like Fortis and telecommunication companies like Rogers Communication. Alright, so number 2 on our list is this ETF called VDY, which is the Canadian High Dividend Yield Index ETF. Now the idea behind VDY is to track the performance of Canadian stocks or companies that usually have high dividend yields. Some of the benefits of this funds is that it gives you exposure to mostly large cap stocks, again similar to XDIV, and these are the companies which are diversified across many different industries. It gives you an exposure to 39 Canadian equities, and again the focus is primarily on financial services, telecommunication and energy sector. The fund size is brilliant at 1.7 Canadian dollars, and the dividend yield for this ETF is at 3.41%. Now, the dividend yield keeps on fluctuating depending on the stock price of the individual stocks that the ETF holds, but for this ETF particularly, it is close to 3.5%. Now, the cumulative 5-year return for this ETF is at very healthy 69%, and 1-year return is at 36.2%, which means that if you'd invested $10,000 in this ETF 5 years ago, it would have become about $16,900. Now, that's a great mix of dividend yield and also ETF price appreciation. The risk level is at medium and the expense ratio is actually not too high at all, kind of like in the lower end at 0.21%, which means that if you invested $10,000 in this ETF, the money that you would be paying for managing this ETF is about $21. The ETF is managed by the company Vanguard, which absolutely needs no introduction. It is one of the biggest players when it comes to ETFs, and looking at the individual stock holdings of this ETF, we again see some of the most common and big names like Royal Bank, Bank of Nova Scotia, Enbridge, which is an energy sector giant, Bank of Montreal, TC Energy Corporation, Bell Media, etc. etc. Alright, so number 3 on our list is the ETF called XEI. Now, analyzing this ETF XEI, we can see that the idea behind this ETF is to seek long-term capital growth by replicating the performance of TSX Composite High Dividend Index. Now, talking of the fund benefits, we can see that it provides a long-term foundational portfolio that pays monthly dividend income. So it's great for people who are looking for, some extra cash, passive cash coming in each month. Now, the fact that most of the big companies in Canada, which are very, very financially stable businesses, are all financial services company, we see the same trend in this ETF as well. The fund focuses on stocks which are primarily coming from financial services, energy and telecommunication businesses. The fund size is large enough at 1.7 Canadian billion dollars. Now, the dividend yield that this ETF tracks is at about 3.6%. And not just that, it also provides a very handsome cumulative 5-year return of about 60%. And in the last year itself, this ETF has grown about 36%, which means if you've invested $10,000 in this ETF 5 years ago, it would have become about $16,600. The risk level for this ETF is again at medium, and the expense ratio is pretty similar to VDY at about 0.22%. Now, at this juncture, let's look at some of the companies that this ETF invests in. Now, before that, one point to notice that instead of over-indexing on financial services companies, this fund actually keeps an equal weightage of both financial services and energy sector, which we know are the companies which are the most well-established businesses in Canada. Now, some of the big name holdings of this ETF is Suncor Energy, TD Bank, Enbridge, Pembina Pipeline Corporation, Bell Media, and TELUS. Alright, so last but not the least is this US dividend ETF that I've also added to the mix, and the ETF's name is SPYD. It's the SPDR portfolio S&P 500 high dividend ETF. Now, similar to Canadian ETFs, we are going to follow the similar methodology, similar analysis for US option as well. So SPYD tracks an index of about 80 high dividend yield stocks which have been selected from the S&P 500 companies. Now, S&P 500 companies we know are the biggest and the best businesses in Canada. Now, talking of the fund benefits, this ETF seeks high yield in the US large cap space, and it gives you a fantastic exposure to about 11 diversified US equities. And the focus is primarily on consumer utilities, financial services, energy, and consumer staple businesses. The fund size is huge at $6.2 billion, so there is no problem at all from a fund liquidity purposes. Now, the dividend yield of this ETF stands at about 3.9%, and we also have a 5-year cumulative return for this ETF, which is at about very decent 55.2%. So again, a great combination of dividend yield and also stock price appreciation or capital gain. Now, one of the best things about this ETF is that it provides all of that performance at a very low or cheap price, since the expense ratio for this ETF is at only 0.07%, which means if you've invested $10,000 in this ETF, all that you have to pay in one single year is $7 for the company to manage this ETF on your behalf. Now, with that, we'll have a glimpse of the top holdings of this ETF, and picked from S&P 500 companies, these are the top 10 holdings of this ETF alongside the weighting percentage of these individual stocks. Alright, so that was all for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you've been watching until the end, I really appreciate that. And also do not forget to post your comments, questions, clarifications in the comment section below. Also, let me know if you want to watch any specific video on a specific topic. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, take very good care of yourself. Thanks and bye-bye.